The first thing he noticed wasn't the blood. It was the way she stood in the doorway, frozen like someone who had already been judged 1,000 times before anyone said a single word. Her chest rose and fell too quickly. Her eyes swept across the small restaurant as if she were looking for the nearest exit instead of the man she was supposed to meet. The red stains on her scrubs came second, spreading across pale blue fabric like a story nobody wanted to hear. And then, slowly, his eyes lifted to hers. For a moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in moments that can change a life forever, take a second right now to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel. Because stories like this don't just entertain, they remind us of who we can be. Daniel had almost walked out. He had checked his phone 3 times in the last 10 minutes, each time hoping for a message, some kind of explanation for why she hadn't shown up. Babysitters weren't cheap, and tonight's had already cost him more than he was comfortable spending. His 5-year-old daughter, Lily, had clung to his leg when he left, her tiny voice asking if this was another maybe mom. That question had stayed with him all evening, heavy and sharp. He wasn't here because he wanted to be. Not really. Blind dates set up by coworkers were never his thing, especially not since Emily passed away 3 years ago. Life had turned into a careful routine of early mornings, packed lunches, overtime shifts, and bedtime stories read through pure exhaustion. There wasn't room for anything else, least of all hope. So when his coworker pushed him on it, swearing this woman was different, he reluctantly said yes. And now she was late, very late. He had already drafted the polite message he planned to send before heading home when the door swung open, and she walked in like a storm. Nobody had prepared him for blood-stained scrubs, tangled hair pulled into a loose bun that had clearly given up hours ago, and eyes that were tired, apologetic, and somehow still holding on to something fragile. Daniel didn't stand up right away. Not because he was put off, but because he was trying to make sense of why, instead of feeling annoyed or embarrassed, he felt something else entirely. Concern. She spotted him after a few seconds. Likely recognized, she explained, in a voice that trembled at first but grew steadier as she went, that she was a nurse at the city hospital. Her shift had ended hours ago, but emergencies don't care about schedules. A child had been brought in critical condition after an accident, and Aisha had stayed. Of course she had stayed. People like her always do. By the time things stabilized, by the time she could finally leave, she realized she had missed the date entirely. She had thought about not coming at all. In fact, she had almost turned around halfway there. But something kept her moving forward. Maybe guilt, maybe curiosity, or maybe, just maybe, a quiet part of her still believed that not everyone would turn away. Daniel listened. He didn't cut in, didn't throw out empty reassurances or tired cliches. He just listened the way people do when they actually want to understand, not just respond. And when she finished, expecting at least a trace of disappointment, he surprised her again. He told her about Lily, about how mornings kicked off with cereal spilled across the floor and wrapped up with bedtime stories he usually fell asleep halfway through. About how he had taught himself to braid hair from YouTube videos, even though the results were questionable at best. About how some nights the house felt way too quiet, and other nights not nearly quiet enough. He didn't bring up loneliness directly, but it lived in the spaces between his words. Aisha caught it because she carried her own version of it. The conversation didn't feel like a first date. It felt like two people, both a little broken, both a little worn down, finding a place where they didn't have to pretend. At some point the food arrived, though neither one of them remembered ordering. They ate slowly, not out of formality, but because neither wanted the moment to end too soon. Outside, the night grew darker. Inside, something soft began to take shape. But life, like it always does, didn't wait for them to sort things out. A week later, Daniel's world tilted. Lily got sick. At first it looked like a simple fever, nothing unusual, nothing alarming. But when it didn't let up, when her small body grew weaker instead of stronger, worry turned into fear, and fear turned into urgency. The hospital became their new reality. Long hours, unclear answers, the constant beeping of machines that felt both reassuring and terrifying all at once. Daniel tried to stay strong for Lily, for himself. But there's only so much a person can carry before the cracks start to show. And that's when Aisha walked back into his life. Not as a date, not as a stranger, but as the one person who truly understood what he was going through. She was there during her shifts, moving between patients with the same quiet focus he had seen that first night. But with Lily, she slowed down. She explained things in ways that actually made sense, offered reassurance without making promises she couldn't keep, and most importantly, she treated Lily like more than just another case. She treated her like a child who deserved warmth. Daniel noticed. He noticed the way Lily's face lit up whenever Aisha came into the room. The way she laughed a little more, even on the hard days. The way hope, fragile as it was, started coming back. But what Aisha hadn't expected was Daniel's reaction. Not just to her care, but to her presence. One evening, after an especially long day, she found him sitting alone in the hallway, head in his hands. She hesitated for a moment. Then she sat down beside him, and without looking up, without any hesitation at all, Daniel reached for her hand. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't planned. It was something deeper. A quiet acknowledgement that he trusted her, that he needed her, that in the middle of all this uncertainty, she had become his steady ground. Aisha felt something shift inside her, because for years, she had been the one holding everyone else together. She had never expected someone to hold on to her in return. Days turned into weeks. Lily slowly got better. Not overnight, not miraculously, but steadily enough to replace fear with relief. And through all of it, Aisha stayed. Not because it was her job, but because it felt like exactly where she was supposed to be. If this story is touching your heart, if you've ever believed that the right people show up in our lives when we need them most, take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. Your support helps keep stories like this going, stories that remind us there is still so much goodness in this world. And before we get to the ending, I have one small request. Comment the word hope if you believe that even the most unexpected moments can lead to something beautiful. The day Lily was discharged, the sun felt brighter than it had in weeks. Daniel held her hand as they walked out of the hospital, a quiet smile on his face that said everything: relief, gratitude, and something else. Something he hadn't let himself feel in a very long time. Possibility. Aisha stood near the entrance, watching them. She hadn't planned to say goodbye, because she wasn't sure she could. But Daniel didn't walk past her. He stopped. For a moment, neither of them said a word. They didn't need to. Everything that mattered had already been said. In late-night conversations, in silent support, in the simple act of showing up. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. Not with grand declarations, not with big promises, but with something far more real. He asked if she would like to come over for dinner sometime. Not as a patient's nurse, not as a stranger from a blind date, but as someone who had become part of their story. Aisha looked down at Lily, who was already smiling up at her, and then back at Daniel. This time, she didn't hesitate. She said yes, because sometimes life doesn't hand you a perfect beginning. Sometimes it gives you blood-stained scrubs, missed expectations, and moments that seem far too messy to turn into anything meaningful. But every now and then, right in the middle of all that chaos, you find something real, something honest, something worth holding on to. And when you do, it changes everything. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something deep inside, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Because stories like this remind us that even in our hardest moments, kindness, love, and second chances are always closer than we think.